welcome everybody for the second session of the first ever virtual Onboard London event. For those that attended the first session last week, welcome back. For those that didn't, why the hell not? You missed out on some great content. Thankfully, all of it was recorded and will be released after this second session. I'm as excited to be hosting this week's session as I was last week's. We've got some great speakers lined up that will share, I'm sure, some pearls of wisdom. More on that shortly. So I'm going to do my shameless plugging thing bit now. For those that didn't have the dubious pleasure of meeting me last week, who am I? I'm going to use the wonder of Zoom to help me explain that a little bit. So here we are. I'm Alan Walker. I am host of Onboard events, quite clearly. I'm also the co-founder of something called Udder, if I can get my hands right. I'd make a terrible weatherman. A HR tech consulting business that helps HR people, just like many of you, make better buying decisions. I also work with vendors to help them build better products, products that solve real-world problems and help them connect to buyers who actually need their help. I'm also the editor of a popular content hub called Chat Talent. You should check it out. It's full of great learning. So enough of me and my shameless self-promotion. I'm going to go back to behaving myself and putting the official branding back up. So what are we here to talk about today? Not me, certainly. We are here to talk about onboarding. And if you count last week and this week as a single event, this is actually my fourth time hosting the Onboard event. I've hosted two live in-person events as well, two in Amsterdam, that had nearly 1,000 attendees at each of those, and a smaller one in London, which is also in person. Those times feel like a long time ago. A different world almost last year. But regardless of where we do it, the format, the style, the layout, the speakers, what I've learned is how people may understand the importance of onboarding and what it can do for their people and businesses, but many are still looking to learn how to deliver a really world-class experience, and that's what these events are about. For this event alone, we've had over 700 people register from organisations like Universal Music, Citibank, Louis Vuitton, TikTok, Coca-Cola, some really big brands. And we've got people here from lots of different countries as well. Actually, that might be a good time for a bit of audience participation. I'd like people to get used to using the chat and the Q&A. So a quick question to you guys in the audience. If you can find the chat at the bottom of your screen, which country and city are you viewing this from? Where are you today? Be great just to get a feel for you guys. So quite a few from the Netherlands, England, UK, France, Netherlands again. Wow, let's just go far too quickly. I can't even keep up with it. I think I saw Romania there, Boston, Italy. Already very international, just looking at those that are flying in. And that's a handful of people that are on this session here. But whichever way you look at it, onboarding is it's a really hot topic. And rightly so. It can be the difference between your employee's success and failure, in my mind. You know, done properly, you give people that feeling of engagement really early on, and I think you heighten it. So not only does it start earlier, it gets greater than you can imagine. Accelerates their purpose, their sense of belonging, and I think it reduces the amount of time it takes them to get up to kind of peak performance. So rather than waiting months, you can be a couple of weeks in and people are really performing well almost instantly. So what organisation doesn't want that? The challenge, of course, is learning how to do onboarding well, which is what these events are all about. So let's take a quick look at what we've got on today. So I'm going to try again some more magic. Let's see if this works. It does. So I'm going to move to the side. So we have, first up, we're going to have Stacey from HP. Then we're going to have talking about why onboarding starts with managers. Then we're going to have Ben from Personio talking about how Personio went from an organisation of 3 to 300 people in less than 3 years, which is just frankly quite incredible. And then last but not least, my friend Katrina from Join Talent, who's going to be talking about the return on investment from onboarding. So good stuff, no doubt, no doubt. What I also want to just quickly mention is the support that we've had from our event partners. First, Personio, our speaker partners, and as you heard a second ago, will be bringing to life their own journey of going from those 3 employees to 300. And of course, our dear friends at Yes We Connect, they've been supporting the event by making sure the content we deliver is of the highest standard. Except for my stuff, of course, I'm a rebellious free spirit who will not be tamed. I will do my own thing. And we're aware indeed would any onboard event be, whether it's virtual or in person, without the wonderful folk at Apical. For those that don't know them, here's some kind of key facts. So Apical are nearly 8 years old. They were founded in 2012. They're listed as a top 250 scale up in the Netherlands. They've 300 customers operating in 25 different languages. And 250,000 people are being onboarded through Apical each year. And Apical's solution, it's not just onboarding, but it's also offboarding and reboarding, something that's really pertinent right now. And if you're interested in either of those topics or any of those areas, onboarding, offboarding, or reboarding, I should mention that as well as this event, Apical are hosting some intimate roundtables next week and the week after, taking a much deeper dive into remote onboarding and reboarding that I'd recommend you attend. I'm sure the team will pop some details into the chat for you and some links to sign up for that. Anyway, let's get back on track with some basic housekeeping before we get into the stuff you're really here for, which certainly isn't me. So after each session, we'll do Q&A. So if you have any questions, make sure to ask those through the Q&A tool down here in Zoom. I think it might be up here, depending on which version you're using. Please do ask those during the talks. Don't wait until the end, as it gives us more time to decide which ones we'll cover with each speaker, etc. And any questions that we don't get to answer, we'll either answer one-to-one by email, if you've connected your Zoom account to your email, or we'll follow up with an FAQ type blog, or probably a bit of both, if I'm honest. If you're having any technical issues at all, we have some techie people sitting in the chat. If you need help, ask there. Don't expect me to answer because I won't be able to, I probably won't have time as I'm doing the hosting, but the guys in the chat will do that. And don't worry too much about taking notes. We'll be recording every session, and you'll be sent these as after the presentations and after the event today for both today's session and last week's session. You'll get everything, the recording, the decks, everything you need. Whew, what time is it? So, I'm a little bit ahead of the game here. First up, we have Stacey from HP showing us why onboarding starts with the manager, and we'll follow up with some Q&A. So just while Stacey does her thing, hello Stacey, and let's do some more of that audience participation. So in the chat, we're really keen to actually find out what type of people we've got here today. So we know where you're from, we're interested in your roles. So what are your jobs? So maybe you could pop that into the chat. Let's see what we get. Onboarding coordinator, trainer, learning consultant, HR recruitment, global TA, lots of HR folk, somebody from marketing, real mix again, real variety. So it's good to see we've got that mixed audience. And it's interesting that so many different people are involved in the onboarding journey that I'm not surprised to see that variety that's coming out of it. So Stacey, welcome.
Thank you.
Out of
Thank
interest,
you.
what's your title?
Yeah, so my title is the employer brand and onboarding leader for the employee experience team, which is part of HR.
And an amazingly long job title.
It's an amazingly long job.
Listen, Stacey, it's great to have you on. I've been really looking forward to for your session when as soon as I heard you were going to be at the event. So I'm going to sit back, chill for a moment and let you do your thing. But I'll be here on hand if you need me, and I'll be back in about 20 minutes or so to do the Q&A with you. Good luck.
Perfect. Thanks, Alan. So first, I'd like to thank Apical for inviting me to present at this conference. I'm excited to share with you HP's onboarding journey and what we have created. for our onboarding journey. We actually launched our new program in February 2020, so right in time for COVID-19. But we've had some really great traction on our onboarding journey. And before I begin, what I'd like to do is actually launch a poll. I'd like to find out how many of you, so I'm take the next 20 seconds or so. So I'd like to find out how many of you have used your managers as a catalyst for onboarding. And we'll give that a couple more seconds. And great, why don't we go ahead and share? Oh, wow, fabulous. 69%, that's amazing, that's great. So that is really amazing. So at HP, managers are a catalyst for our onboarding program. And in fact, that goes back to our 80-year history when our founders, Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard, had started the company. And when it was much smaller, they actually managed by walking around. And what that meant was they got out onto the floor and started talking to all of the employees. They wanted to hear what they were working on, what they were doing. And it just was a way for them to feel connected to those employees. And as HP grew, they couldn't necessarily do that. They couldn't be in all places at the same time. And so what they did was they tasked our managers to do that walking around for them. And that has since become the HP way. And that is part of our culture. In fact, you can even read about Bill and Dave's journey to creating HP in the book that is written called The HP Way. In 2015, HP separated to become two different and distinct companies. I work for HP Inc., which is the hardware, software, graphics business. And we are based all around the globe. We have 55,000 employees. And when we separated, we looked for a way to reinvent our culture as well as reinvent our onboarding experience. And so in 2017, our CEO took a business trip around Asia and around Europe. And during that business trip, he sat down with managers in many, many offices. And he essentially opened up the conversation and said, tell me what's working, tell me what's not working. This was about 2 years after our separation. And time again, these managers came back to our CEO and said, our onboarding is broken. We need help with onboarding. We don't know what to do. Can you help us with this? And when he got back to Palo Alto, he set those wheels in motion. And so a team was gathered to help solve the onboarding issues that we had. And so before developing the tools and resources, we worked with a cross-functional team and we interviewed hiring managers, recruiters, we interviewed new employees, we interviewed our talent acquisition, we even interviewed competing companies to see what they were doing. And this is what we found out. And this was our current state in 2018. So we were consistent and we wanted to get to distinct. We were fragmented and we wanted to get to integrated. It was confusing. The whole process was confusing for managers and we wanted to make it coherent. It was inefficient and we wanted it customized. We wanted each onboarding journey to feel that we wanted each new employee to feel that the journey was customized to them. It was tactical and not balanced. There was no experience. It was all about forms and processes, and we wanted to make sure that there was an experience. It was incomplete and we wanted it lasting. It's our first impression for our employees as soon as they walk through that door. And it was frustrating and we wanted it rewarding. So at the same time that we were developing the onboarding, we were working very closely with our corporate brand team. And we were developing the strategic messaging or our employer value proposition that would entice new candidates to HP. And as we were developing this, our EVP messages at HP, you can reinvent what matters most in your career across the company and for people everywhere. And underneath that statement, it was under 3 pillars: our empowering culture, our globally connected community, and our breakthrough innovation. And that was something we wanted to make sure that we aligned to our onboarding program. So our EVP and our onboarding program really needed to be married together. This is a message that goes out prior to somebody joining the company. And so when they got through the door, we wanted to ensure that there was consistency there. And as I mentioned earlier, we had a cross-functional team, and this team decided what we needed to do before starting the tools, the resources, is we really needed to develop a strategy for this program. And we sat in a room for 3 days, and our very first day, we shared our onboarding experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, inside HP, outside HP. And I remember telling my story with the company I worked with prior to HP. I had an 8-week pre-boarding experience. And the reason for that, which in the US is rather long, but the reason for that was I was moving from California to New York. And I had to close down things in California, and I had to relocate and look for housing. And during that 8-week process, my manager connected with me every week. And not just to make sure I was filling out those forms and signing up for my benefits, but he wanted to make sure that things were going okay. Was the relocation agent doing their job? Were the movers there on time? And during that 8-week period, I had an opportunity to travel 3 times back and forth to New York. And when I arrived in New York, my manager had always sent a message to my hotel, making sure I arrived safely. And then in addition to that, I was invited to lunch. And each time we would go out to lunch, he would invite different members of my team. And so by the time I showed up on day 1, I had already had a network. And so for us, that was an amazing experience. And so as we sat as a cross-functional team in these 3 days of meetings, we conducted a design thinking session. And we had a whiteboard, and we threw Post-it notes all over this whiteboard. And we looked at each milestone of the onboarding journey. And we said, okay, what is it that we want our employees to think, feel, and do during each phase of this onboarding journey? And it was really important for us to put ourselves in the shoes of the new employee. We also had to make sure that at each phase of the onboarding journey, that it met with our HP priorities, and then what were the touch points or communications channels that we wanted to make sure that we were hitting. And because managers are a catalyst for this, we did the same journey for managers. What did we want our managers to think, feel, and do during the onboarding journey? And what priorities did those meet up against, and what were those touch points? So after those 3 days, a few of us got together in a room and we created our vision for HP's onboarding, which is this. At HP, onboarding is true to what we stand for and what we excel at, delivering amazing people-first experiences enriched by technology. And you can see that that has the same feeling as our employer value proposition. But we had to relay this vision to our managers. And so what we needed to do was to develop an experience that helped managers look forward to onboarding instead of it being a chore. We needed to provide an understanding that adding new talent is a catalyst for growth on their team and for their own personal growth. Those new employees that come through the door bring fresh perspectives and fresh ideas. That's what helps us innovate. And then we needed to create a transparent process. Managers needed to know exactly what they needed to do at each stage of the onboarding experience. We also wanted to put the employee at the center of everything we did. We needed to set them up for long-term success and make them feel welcome, confident, and prepared. So going back to where we were and where we wanted to go, we looked at some of the quotes that we got in our interviews, and some of my favorites were this: I'm surprised at everything that needed to be accomplished during pre-boarding and during the first week. That was from an employee. They just didn't understand, there was no transparency for them either. All of a sudden they were surprised there were all these things they had to do. And then one of my favorite quotes from managers was, I've lost so much time trying to figure out how to get everything ready for my new employee. And that is not an experience we wanted our managers to go through. And so we had some important shifts, and those important shifts not only include our managers, but we had a broad sponsorship from our executive leadership team. And so we wanted to make sure that our current state turned into that future state. And so we came up with the quotes that you see here. This is what we wanted our hiring managers to say, and this is what we wanted our executive leadership team to say. And so when we rolled this out, we did this in phases, and we started in August 19 with a soft launch, and we developed tools, the tools and resources for managers. And then we went out to about 1,300 managers, and we said, with active requisitions in the system, and we said, use these tools, let us know how they work. And so we had about a month and a half that they were using the tools. They'd come back to us with back and forth about what was working, what wasn't working. And then in October, we put together a 90-day pilot with 60 selected managers in the Americas, Europe, and Asia. And that experience included not only all the tools and resources, but also the mobile app. And so we were able to release the mobile app to those new employees during the pilot. And during that pilot, we conducted 2 focus groups. So when we hit that first 30 days, we had a focus group with recruiters and managers, testing everything, talking to them, how did it go? And then at the end of that, in January, we did another focus group with managers, recruiters, and new employees, because we did want to hear back. And then we were able to make whatever adjustments before our launch in February. And so what we found is that onboarding is such a business impact. And we know that, and we saw through the polling question that many of you used managers, and that's great because managers matter. It is through our discovery, we discovered that employees that have one-on-one time with their direct manager during the pre-boarding and onboarding experience have a better understanding of the business, and also they're better performers. And for the manager, it really stops the churn of having to rehire somebody and the productivity that goes down when you're having to rehire. And so how did we get here? We had broad sponsorship from all functions of HR. And then we had extensive input. And as we mentioned, we did all of our focus groups and our discovery. And then we also had that senior leadership support. And so here's what we developed. Our experience, as I mentioned, is based around the employee at the center of everything. And so what could we give managers to help them put the employee at the center of everything? We developed onboarding tools and resources, and I'll share with you a little deeper in that in just a second. And then we also had, worked with Apical to develop a mobile app, and that mobile app provided the employee with checklists and a roadmap and what they could expect so that they could have a completely transparent experience. We formalized our onboarding buddy program. We knew managers, some of them were asking team members to be an onboarding buddy. But we also know that many teams are not co-located. And so we really needed to make sure that there was a local buddy available. We improved our orientation sessions. In fact, we reinstituted face-to-face orientation sessions, which are now all virtual. But we also improved our virtual onboarding sessions as well. And those orientations are continuing to take place twice a month. We had many managers who wanted to give HP swag. You know, we're trying to build brand ambassadors, and they wanted their new employees to feel connected to the company. And so they didn't know where to go. They didn't know what to get. And so we developed a welcome kit that you see on this slide. And that welcome kit allows the manager to give it as it is, or they can even enhance it. We've also got other products that they can choose for that. And then I have a team, a small team, there's 3 of us, and we offer for the first time manager support. And managers know that they can connect with us if they have questions, issues, or challenges, and then we'll be there to help and assist them. And so just to share with you some of the tools and resources we have as managers, as I mentioned, we have our hiring manager website, and now everything the manager needs to do or know is in one convenient location. They don't have to go hunting around the intranet to try to find things. We've developed roadmaps and many things for them, infographics that help them understand exactly where they need to go. We also have a robust manager portal in the app, and we have encouraged our managers to log on to that app where they can find a checklist of items, and then we are continuing to build that as well. And then we built a roadmap, and this is an interactive roadmap. This will also be part of the manager portal on our website. And this roadmap allows the manager to take each step of the journey and understand what happens at each step of the journey, a completely transparent journey. One of our top downloads from the manager website is our 90 days onboarding template. When we were developing these tools in October, I had an opportunity to use these tools as I was onboarding a new employee. And I am based in Palo Alto, California, and my new employee was coming from Bucharest. And I was able to create this 90 days onboarding plan for her. And we had different time zones. And so this became her guide. She knew what she needed to do her first 2 weeks, her calendar, everything was on her calendar ready to go. And she also knew what her objectives were. I also assigned a local buddy for her because I was not there to assist. And so we would meet every week during a one-on-one. And we would go over her objectives to make sure that she understood everything. But she had a roadmap and a guide to help her. And then, of course, our onboarding buddies, which really help our managers do that managing by walking around. They're there to answer those questions. And so we developed a website for our onboarding buddies as well. And they have tools and resources. They understand what their role is as a buddy. And so now we've been live for 3 months. And so how is it going? So here's our metrics. And we just took our metrics, we just completed our metrics for the 3 months. And we have approximately 5,000 managers. Not all of them are hiring managers, but we have 1,700 managers who have accessed our website. And what we know is that managers don't go to the hiring manager website until they have an active requisition. So we expect the manager metrics to improve and increase. And then in addition to that, 100% of our managers who have taken this survey have said the tools and resources, they have all the tools and resources necessary for a successful onboarding program. And that's a great number for us. On a 5-point scale, our new employees have said that the 90 days onboarding plan has created clarity in their role. And that is one of the things the employees said they didn't have. And so we're very excited about that. And then we do ask a question on are they confident in the ability to deliver on their job? And 100% of employees so far have said that they are. And we've learned a lot of lessons. And those lessons were because we took the time to really to really get to know who our target audience was. We didn't assume anything. We couldn't. We had to put ourselves in the shoes of both the new employee and the manager. We understood that collaboration was so important, and that it was really important to really build that strategy of the journey before you build the tools, because we started to kind of build tools and then things shifted and changed. We tested everything, and we held focus groups. That 90-day pilot was extremely helpful. And then we also wanted to make sure that pre-boarding and onboarding reflected our culture. This is an opportunity for us to build those brand ambassadors. And so we really did want to make sure that that was part of the onboarding journey. And just to share with you a little bit of feedback, we're always looking for improvement. So I'm sharing both good and bad feedback. We've had great feedback on our mobile app from new employees, but we've also had amazing feedback about managers and teams, especially, and this feedback was actually just taken just a couple of weeks ago. So especially during the time of COVID, we are having teams and managers really step up for those new employees and make them feel as if they are part of that team. We also have the critical feedback, and my favorite is this comment here. This is an employee who decided not to opt into the app, and she made a comment that she didn't remember what happened after she signed the contract. And when we spoke to her, she was actually part of our focus group. She said, I should have signed up for the app. I should have signed up for the app. So it was a really interesting, it really solidified everything that we had developed. And with that, I am open to questions.
I'm back. Would you mind stopping sharing your video, or did you want to? Yeah, that's great, wonderful. There we go. Thank you for that. That was excellent, very thorough. Love the detail, fantastic. We have loads of questions for you, Stacey. Prepare yourself. No. They're really good, actually. And this one came up a few times. The first one I'm going to ask you, and actually I wrote it down as a question as well as it coming from the audience. How localized is the onboarding experience? Does it differ geographically? And does it differ between teams and functions?
No, what we've done is we've created a consistent onboarding experience around the globe. What we have enabled, though, is that each of the templates that we have developed for our managers are customizable. So a manager, such as the 90 days plan. So the person on my team, Eliza, her role is different than another team member's role. And so I was able to essentially customize these templates for Eliza specifically. But the experience locally is consistent across the board.
Okay, good. Thanks for that. Why was that decision? Have people asked for personalization or any other, more like localization? Sorry.
What our managers really fit, because many of our managers have employees all over the place. So you're not always co-located. So you may be a manager sitting in Palo Alto and have an employee in Bucharest or have an employee in India. And so we wanted, it's really difficult to really localize an onboarding program. And so having that consistency with an onboarding program with the ability to customize is really the route that we needed to take, because we have such a broad spectrum of employees all over the world and managers who manage all over the world.
So consistency makes it work, particularly in an organisation
Yep.
of the size and
Yep.
complexity of HP. So
Yeah.
where does the role of the manager stop and that of a buddy or mentor begin? And how do you divide
Yes.
different roles in that process?
Yeah, so the manager's role starts the minute the offer is signed. So once the new employee signs their offer, that's when the manager's onboarding starts to kick in, and they're responsible. And so they work very closely with the recruiter. And so the recruiter kind of keeps them up to date on what's happening, and then they let them know. We actually even developed we develop templates for the recruiters to send to managers. As soon as that employee has signed the offer, the recruiter sends a template and says, hey, great, yippee, your employee has just signed the offer. Begin now. And it has 5 things that the manager should do right away. And the first thing that we want the manager to do, and we want them to get involved as early as possible. And as you saw from those statistics that I shared, we have them actually call the new employee, congratulate them on accepting the role and welcoming them to the team. And then we have them follow up immediately after that call with an email.
I like that. So, because I always think that I think most people want to be good managers. Some of them know how to and can be forgetful. So those little prompts are great for them doing it. Some of them want to be, but don't necessarily know how to. So those little prompts are great for giving those hints and tips. And it just works. People want to deliver a good experience. They want their employee to be engaged and passionate about joining. They don't want them just to kind of rock up and feel completely lost. But they sometimes just need a little bit of a helping hand, don't they, to make that kind of stuff happen.
Yes, that's right. And you know, we also found that we had a lot of, we promote people to be managers. And so they're new, they've never hired, they've never onboarded somebody. And so what we have done is, we're working right now with our people development team. They have it's kind of an onboarding for new managers. They have a whole training program for new managers, and we're working with them to make sure that our onboarding program, we call it HP Wayfinder, a little nod to the HP Way. And so we call it HP Wayfinder. And so we are making sure that HP Wayfinder information is part of the new manager onboarding or new manager training. And in fact, we, with all that's been going on with COVID, all of our onboarding is now virtual. So everything we've done, that consistent experience can be done virtually. And now we are looking at a more flexible work environment as we move forward. So, we're still not stopping. We're still going to train. We're going to develop some training to make sure that managers understand how to do this in a mobile environment, how to do this in a flexible type environment. So we have great bones and a great foundation. So now what we can do is enhance that.
Excellent, excellent. Another question from the audience here. So they've said they love the welcome kits. I like the welcome kits as well. How do you ensure that the welcome kits arrive at the employees' homes, particularly during lockdown? Are you shipping those internationally?
Yes. So we on our hiring manager website, we have when they click on the link to the welcome kit, it takes them. So what the managers actually have to make a choice. They make a choice of where the employee is located, where the manager is located, because we have different distributions all over the world. Because as you can imagine, we can't just have distribution in the United States. To ship something around the world would be astronomically expensive. And so we have vendors all over the world, and we have created this welcome kit pages that allows that manager to connect directly to the right distribution. As you can imagine, our distribution is very keen to make sure that they are getting those welcome kits to the homes right now, because business is so crazy. And so they have assured us that, these welcome kits are arriving, and they have a whole process in place. And so the manager has to make sure that they have the new employee's address. And in addition to that, of course, a new employee gets a laptop. So that laptop has to be shipped to the new employee's home, because they have to get into our firewall. And the only way they can do that is to get that laptop. So there have been a lot of things that we have been working very closely with our IT team, as well as our vendors, to ensure that they get the employee gets that full experience. And we've had, like everybody, I'm sure we've had some glitches in that, but they've been minor to the, for the amount of the new employees that we've had since March, since the mandate to work from home. So it's been
testament to your, not only your people and HR and onboarding skills, but also your logistical skills by all accounts. Anyway, Stacey, listen, that was fantastic. Thanks so much for your time. And I'm sure I could probably carry firing questions at you all afternoon, but we have got to move on. It's time for Ben to take centre stage. So maybe if you could hang around in the chat for a little bit and see what goes on in there and see what other questions there were. Maybe you could answer some of them in the chat, Stacey.
Absolutely. Great.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Cheers. Take care.
Bye.
So next up, we have Ben from Personio. He'll be talking to us about Personio's journey from going from 3 to 300 employees in less than 3 years. And as before, we'll have some Q&A at the end of that. Before Ben kicks off, let's do a little bit more audience participation. So in the chat, could you tell us how you rate your onboarding program on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being crap and 10 being absolutely freaking amazing? I'm not expecting many 10s, because if you're a 10, you've come here to brag. If you're less than a 10, you've come here to learn, in my opinion. How you doing, Ben?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Yeah, good. Good to see you again, my friend.
I know, it's been a little while. How's life?
Yeah, good. Well, life's a little bit different from when I last saw you, no doubt. As it is for you also, with pretty much 99% of the population. But yeah, interesting times. Interesting. When was the last time you went more than 2 miles away from your house?
Well, actually, I had to go and deliver some food to a relative, which was about an hour away. And I think that was like the highlight of the last 6 weeks, was actually going beyond the like 1 mile radius from my house. So yeah.
Do you feel like the intrepid explorer going out into the wilderness?
It was exactly like that. It was exactly.
I think I've developed some kind of agoraphobia. I've kind of got the fear a little bit about going any further than that 1 or 2 miles from home. We shall see. But listen, anyway, I don't want to take over your session. We've got 20-ish minutes of gold coming from you, I believe, around Personio scaling from that tiny little 3 bods 3 years ago to the 300 people it is now. So over to you, Ben. Good luck. I'll see you in a second.
Thank you very much. Cool. Hello, everyone. I am Ben, as Alan mentioned. I lead the international expansion at Personio, and I'm also the UK country manager. So I have a particular focus on the UK. And as Alan mentioned, I'm going to be talking to you today about our journey. It was originally 3 to 300, but the real challenge that we have with this is we keep hiring people, so it really quickly gets out of date. So it's now gone from the 3 to 300 in 3.5, well, in just short of 4 years, to 3 to 400 in just over 4 years. So today I'm going to be sharing a little bit about the learnings from our side, both on efficient recruiting and also obviously how we've been onboarding people in that time as well. So really quickly, I can't think of any better way to start a presentation than with a monster. And not just any monster, but this is who we refer to as the admin monster. And this is the person that Personio is at war with. We believe that the admin monster is the person who steals all of your time and makes you spend all of your precious time that you should be doing the really important and fun parts of the role, and makes you use it with paperwork, and makes you use it doing all of those manual processes that we're big believers of should be automated. So the reason that we exist at Personio is to defeat your admin monster and allow you to concentrate on the more important parts of the job. So the big problem that we see while we exist is too much admin. We hear this again and again and again. Inefficient processes where people don't have time to invest in improving the processes in general. And then finally, poor decision support to actually become a bit more strategic and make those big decisions within the organization. Now, a quick question for you all. This doesn't go into the actual question, but I was just going to cheat here. I imagine everyone's going to get this one right. But what is the biggest influence on the success of any business? I can't actually see the chat, but I'm assuming everyone's got this right. The answer, of course, is people. People are the biggest influence on the success of any business. And we believe that we want you as HR managers and as people in the organization to invest into your people and not be able to be restricted by having to do all of the admin stuff. So we really do and see ourselves as enabling HR to be the best function they possibly can within an organization. And when we look a little bit at the transformation that HR has gone through, we've kind of split this into 3 different sections. So to start with, we see that HR was almost like went through a digitalization process. And what that meant was effectively just digitalizing something that before was very manual and boring, such as booking a holiday, using a tool, making sure you can book your holiday, no stress, nice and easy. The next part came when people started looking. It was actually really interesting hearing Stacey talk about how they optimize their onboarding process. But when people start looking at their onboarding process and start working through, how can I make this better? What do I do to improve the performance of our current process here? And we kind of feel if you don't have that first digitization process in place, it's really hard to start having the time to invest into optimizing. And then the final stage that we see within HR transformation relies upon the insights. So we believe that you can't be strategic in HR until you excel at the operational side of stuff. And once you've got that piece in place, then you can start digging into the really critical parts of business. So then this is where we've started seeing that HR have had a much bigger role to play in the organization, where now in a lot of companies, they actually have a seat at the main table. So that'll be at board meetings, that'll go into planning on like staff in the future. And as we said before, if people are the most important part of any organization, really doubling down and investing to make sure that you can support them as best as you possibly can. So that's a bit about Personio. We are a one-based platform called HR Matters. We cover everything from applicant tracking and onboarding to payroll and performance in one place. But today I'm going to talk to you much more about our growth. And this is our growth from when we started in October 2015. And as you can see, I wasn't actually one of the founders, but this was the group of founders. There's 4 originally, all looking very cool and trendy in this one. And then over the last 4 years, we've grown to, as you can see, just over 400 people in that time. And when we were 4 people, it was actually really interesting because the challenge talking to the founders was, it's quite hard to get people to fall in love with your vision. It's quite hard to get people to fall in love with your dream. You haven't got all the luxuries in life. You don't have the amazing offices. There's definitely no onboarding process, but it's very much just about what can we do to try and attract our first hires. And these are really key hires, really important in terms of the future of the organization. So the belief often is when you're a small company, making those hires is by far the hardest bit. And the saying should go that as you start to grow, as you start to build a brand, as you build an employer brand, this should get easier over time. So we're very fortunate. We raised a big round of funding recently. So we raised about 75 million at the beginning of the year. And we invest in our people. And I don't know how better you can invest than invite everyone to go to the Oktoberfest. But this is where we did grow to. Probably this was about 4 or 5 months ago. Looking at this now makes me feel a bit nauseous, just having this many people close to me. But having the opportunity to all go out and hang out together and go to Oktoberfest was a really nice thing. But the idea is it should get easy. And I just want to show you, first of all, just how hard it is to do this. So to start with, I want to ask the question, how many interviews do you think it took us to hire? It was about 200 people last year. I'll give you a little bit of time to answer this. Okay, can we see the results? So most people think it was about 4,358. The actual answer was 8,243 interviews to hire 200 people. And I'm going to break down exactly what that looked like in the entire recruitment process, about what was actually involved here. So this is some of the hiring madness that was involved in the last 12 months. So we posted on 50 different job boards. We had 16 different agencies that we worked with. We screened nearly 14,000 candidates. There were 270 on-site coding challenges. There were 22 in-house events. We had to double our recruiting team to 12 across 2 different offices. As I mentioned, we conducted 8,000 interviews. That was over with 4,000 different candidates in that time. And we relocated more than 20 people, including a dog. So our big learning from growing at this pace is that initially we felt that hiring is hard at the early stage of a business. The reality of this is that hiring, especially at the pace we wanted to go, is hard at any stage of your business. The only difference is that the challenge is slightly different. So that for us was a huge learning, and I can assure you it definitely isn't easy to grow at this pace. So I'm going to talk through a little bit about what we did to make sure that our recruiting process was efficient. You could probably argue that we can improve it even more and try and make that even more efficient. But I just want to tell you a little bit about what our process looks like right now. So right now we have 3 different stages. Well, it's actually 5 different stages as a minimum for each different person who's hired. You can see that originally these were all office-based. Well, 2 out of 3 of these sections were office-based. So it was originally a phone call with a recruiter. There was then a team lead interview. And then there were 3 different interviews that were on site in the office. Now, obviously, these have all had to move remote at the moment, which is an interesting challenge in itself. But the most important part for us here is actually having a standardized recruiting process. I'm a big believer in the only way of making an interview process fair being if you actually have a really standardized process where you ask the same questions to almost every single candidate, so that then you can actually assess each different one impartially, as opposed to having a completely unstructured process where everyone is doing something completely independent on their own. So for us, it was really important to start with, to have this really clear process in place when we start recruiting. Also worth knowing, at this stage, every single person can veto. So it doesn't matter who's involved, 1 veto and you're out. The next thing I think that is often overlooked is actually making sure that there's a really clear role expectation before you start recruiting. This can sometimes sound basic, but to a lot of people, it really isn't. They kind of overlook this. And the impact of this can actually become really evident when it gets to the onboarding stage. So one of the hardest things I think in onboarding is if there's not alignment and a managed expectation about what's going to be expected of the role and when the new employee actually starts. So the big thing here for us is making sure before you start any recruitment process, making sure there's absolute alignment across the organization of exactly what's going to be involved in this role. And then when it gets to the interview process, making sure that you articulate this as much as possible to the candidate, making sure they can have a really clear understanding of exactly what they're trying to be doing, what the core expectations are, makes such a big difference, first of all in the recruiting, but then on the retention side further down the line as well. As well as that, big believer in God we trust, everyone else bring data. So we continuously track and analyze the data. We always want to be able to see where things are going well, where things aren't going well, what we can improve. And instead of using the gut, we do want to make sure we measure every single stage of the process and look at where we can try and improve things. And then as well as that, we also believe in trusting the gut a little bit. You have to make a call on this stuff. You have to decide whether or not to continue or to reject. But every single person who interviews at Personio has to go through unconscious bias training. So the idea for us is that we want to make sure that every single time that you do make a decision, you always challenge yourself. Am I doing this for the right reason? Or am I just saying yes or no because this is somebody who I'd like to go for a drink with in the pub if they do ever finally open? So again, you trust your gut, but always challenge it yourself to make sure that you're actually evaluating everyone fairly. So the big takeaways on the recruiting side for us are, first of all, make sure you standardize your recruiting process. Having a real clear expectation on the job role is really important, both in recruiting, but then also for the candidate experience, should they become an employee. Always track and analyze the data, see where you've got loggerheads and see where you can try and improve things. And then trust your gut, but always challenge it deliberately as well. On to the next question, which is a bit more onboarding related. I loved Alan's question earlier on where he said, how good do you think you are at onboarding? There's a lot of 8s and 9s out there, people. I'm going to be honest, I was a little bit surprised. This is an interesting question because it's what percentage of your employees think they have a good onboarding process? Oh, so think they don't have a good onboarding process. So how many of them think they've not got a good onboarding process here? I'm remembering 8s and 9s in here, so I'm expecting this to be a low number based on all of your previous estimates. I'll give you 2 minutes just to finish, well, 2 seconds just to finish. Okay, and can we see the results? Maybe see the results? Okay, so most people went for the middle marker there. About 66% think they don't have a good one. The actual reality of this is 88% of employees think their company doesn't have a good onboarding process. And I think this can sometimes be where there's a bit of a disparity between what we think we're offering and what our employees actually experience. So again, this is a great way to actually, I actually loved in Stacey's presentation when she spoke about getting feedback as well from the employees and actually trying to understand what's going well and what's not going well and what can be improved. So again, what we hear from HR people, what we hear from employees can actually be quite a big difference here in what they think. Obviously, you guys are all amazing. You're definitely the people who have the perfect onboarding process, by the way. As I mentioned, 88% of employees don't think they have a good onboarding process. What's the impact of this? Should anyone actually care within your organization? Well, we've seen that it's about 82% higher staff retention with a good onboarding process, which means we also see around 1 in 5 people leave an organization due to a bad onboarding process, which is a terrifying statistic, by the way. So if people don't care, they should. And Alan referred to this a little bit before as well. How much more productive can someone be on their first day? We see this as about 70% more productive on day one. When you start looking at the ROI on this, investing in onboarding is so valuable to an organization, which is why I actually love this event in general, why I think it's an amazing event, but also why it kind of scares me that there's lots of companies that still haven't optimized this and still don't invest enough into this in general. Some other shock numbers just to scare everybody is that only 30% of people get internal training in the first 2 weeks. 50% receive information and tasks about the processes that are going to be involved, and only 60% of people find their workplace ready on their first day. So again, this is something that we think really needs to change. And we do see some change here, but we want to try and make sure that we can facilitate that as fast as possible. So again, recruiting process, onboarding, staff retention, that's our big purpose at Personio. And I'm going to talk you through a little bit about our own onboarding process, what we try and do, and where we see hopefully some things that other people might be able to learn from. I've already learned some things from Stacey as well that I'm going to try and report back to our HR team that we can try and implement as well. So I actually learned the term pre-boarding, I think it was in last week's session, which is the official term for this, but we're big believers that onboarding starts before the first day. So for us, before the first day, there's always greetings from the future team. Everyone always messages the person and makes sure they feel welcome. Invitation to company and team events. Right now, that's probably another pub quiz. Yes, another one. But if not, that would be inviting them to the Christmas party in advance, inviting them to the company ski trip or whatever you may have. But we're big believers in trying to bring people in before they've even actually started in the role. Really clear about information from day one. Make sure there's no ambiguity there. And one thing that's often forgotten is preparing the current employees. The last thing you want is someone new walking into the office and no one having any idea who they are. So again, making sure everyone's aware of what's going on. Again, Stacey mentioned a lot about designated buddies. We're big believers in buddies as well. I'm going to elaborate a little bit about that as well. Again, making sure you have someone prepared who knows what they're going to be doing. And writing an orientation plan. We want everyone to turn up on their first day and not have to think about what should I be doing next? Where should I be going? Should I be in a certain meeting right now? So we want to make sure that there's a really clear plan of what people should be doing. Finally, getting access to everything and making sure that the workplace is prepared. As we saw before, only 60% of people have a prepared workplace, And this is actually a fantastic employer branding hack, by the way, if you don't know that, because by putting a hoodie on someone's desk and all the fantastic swag that I'm sure that you all have, people love to take photos of it and share it on LinkedIn as well, which is really, really great for us as well when we're still hiring. The second big thing is, I was speaking to someone recently and they told me there's the three most stressful things in life are getting married, moving house, and changing job. And I think it's really important sometimes that we can get so obsessed with the idea of just onboarding people and moving on to the next, that we can sometimes forget just how stressful and how emotional it can be for an employee when they do start a new job, especially if they're moving from somewhere they've been for a long time. So for us, day one, and really looking after the emotional side is really, really important for us. So again, Welcome Buddy has a huge part to play here, really trying to build that relationship at the very beginning and lays out everything on the first day. We always have a kickoff meeting with the line manager as well, who talks through, first of all, starts building that relationship between supervisor and manager. But we also have a group lunch. We're at a situation now where when it comes to onboarding, we onboard somewhere in the region of about 20 to 40 people every month, which means that we have, if anyone asks, adapted this virtually. And it's kind of worked. I think it still does work, where you have all new starters have lunch together and everyone's in the same boat. It's quite nice to know that you're not the only one who's starting a new job in that scenario. So obviously in office, we cater it and have everything there. Right now, it's just a remote version of it. Then we also have a really, really clear onboarding session scheduled in the very first days. And when we talk about the onboarding sessions, this is typically what we expect the calendar to look like for every new starter. So you can see there's a couple of breaks we try to put in there. If people we do allow people to go and get a glass of water occasionally, or go to the toilet in between sessions. But we really do believe that for somebody on their first day or in their first few days, we don't want them looking around the office and twiddling their thumbs and thinking, what should I be doing right now? So we really believe in packing out that calendar, making sure that they can just follow it blindly and know exactly where they have to be and what they have to be doing in order to be set up to be fully onboarded. So what do these include? Some of the things that we've got a lot of value from. So first of all, HR has a big role to play in this for us, the welcome presentation. We want to establish a really strong relationship between HR and every employee. We want to make sure that should there ever be any issues further down the line, everyone feels comfortable talking to HR. We think they've got a really big role to play in this. We also have an office tour right now. Again, that's moved to virtual office tour, which does exist as well, by the way. So people can get a virtual office tour of what the Personio office looks like, even if they can't be there in person right now. Photo shooting is a lot harder remotely, but there are photo shoots that go on. Again, if people want to update their LinkedIn profile, they want to put a new picture there, or if they want to add their photo to their Personio profile, let's make it a current one. Let's make it something that people can actually relate to, not the picture of what they once looked like 20 years ago, when unfortunately we all looked a lot more beautiful maybe than we do right now. As I mentioned, group lunch booked in there. We're really big on OKR sessions, so making sure there's an intro to OKRs. Everyone has a product demo. Again, I'm sure we're not alone in that, but if you're in finance, legal, whatever department, it's really important that you still understand the Personio product and what it is we're trying to achieve there. Team presentations from everyone in the team. And one of the things that I enjoyed the most, we always have a presentation by our CEO. So he's obviously a very busy person himself, but of all the things that he can invest his time into, he's so keen to make sure that every new employee has the opportunity to sit and speak with them. It's not one-to-one, it's actually in a group, but for him to share the operating principles, the values, the vision, where we want to be going, what we want to be achieving on a high level. But as well as that, he wants to kind of, again, build a bit of a communication where people can talk to him and people can approach it. There's also a big Q&A session here to allow everyone to talk and ask questions to him as well. And it is very much an AMA kind of format. There's no filters allowed in there. As a German company, I'm sure it will surprise nobody to know that data security is also very high on the agenda in terms of us onboarding. So the first days and weeks, we always make sure that the new employees present themselves over Zoom at our all team meeting. It's a nice way to get everyone to know who they are. As we said, clear tasks in the first few weeks, regular feedback sessions the entire way through, and regular meetings with their buddy. International colleagues are really supported to make sure if they need new flats, they need to find a flat or anything, we go out our way to support them. And again, HR's role is continuous in this. We always make sure they check in an informal manner over a coffee. This just allows them that if there are any problems that are bubbling or anything that could be going wrong, they can surface them. They can talk about them and you can try and address them. See if there's something we can be doing as an organisation to help before it gets too late. So what do we ask for on average in each employee? This is over 50 different tasks at Personio that is involved in onboarding. And they have to be done in exactly the right order. You can't have them going in the wrong order. And it's 5 different departments involved for every single employee that happens. And this has to be in the right order as well. It has to be at the right time. You can't have somebody's laptop arriving on their 3rd day. It has to be arriving at exactly when you want to do it. So for us, we obviously use our own product on this one, but we're big believers in having a software here to really help you to automate as much of this as possible so you can manage everything in one way. So the big takeaways from onboarding for us are make sure it starts before day one, make sure everyone knows exactly what's expected of them. It really does increase productivity and commitment to invest into your staff at this stage. Using software can absolutely help to simplify some of these administrative tasks, and it gives more time for you to actually do the more important part of your roles, which is what we consider to be the human element. And the human element should hopefully allow you to really dig into how things are going and try to optimize the process. If anyone's interesting, we also have an onboarding checklist, just so you can kind of see how we're doing things. If there's anything in there you want to replicate. But that is everything from me on Personio and how we've grown from 3 to 400 people over the last 4 years.
Thanks, mate. Awesome. So I've got a whole heap of questions for you. We've got about 3 minutes to get through them.
Cool.
So we'll go from, I'll go from the top, but I think I'm going to be reasonably selective here. So how, number one, right at the very top, this one's from me. Why did it take so many interviews, do you think, to hire 200 people? Because even 4,000 candidates, forget the number of interviews, 4,000 candidates to me seems excessive. If they all they all got at least one interview.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that some of it is people who've had multiple interviews there, but as you said, it's a lot of different candidates. And I think a part of it is that we want to make sure that we're hiring the right people. We have really low churn rates. So we're definitely not at the revolving door kind of position. So something that our CEO told me on my very first day when I was hiring a team, he said, like, if there's any doubt, it has to be a no hire. You have to be so militant on this one. And I think that's part of this, something that's really kept the great culture that we have, that we've been quite careful about who we do and don't hire. That can be incredibly frustrating when you're trying to grow a team yourself and you want to try and move fast. But you have to kind of respect the process from that side. So I completely agree. It is frustrating. I found it painful myself. Genuinely, I do think it's the right thing if you want to build a company in the right way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not debating that. I've got to get my head around it. It sounds a lot on the outset. So with regard more specifically to onboarding, how do you guarantee the quality of your onboarding program when you onboard that many people? And what tools do you have in place to make sure you can manage employee satisfaction as they're going through their onboarding process? Yeah,
completely. So we use Personio's onboarding process to try and manage everything, and that automates a lot of the tasks that go in there. But when it comes to trying to manage how the individuals are and how do we keep a high level, first of all, there's always training that every manager has to go into. A lot of it we actually find is an onboarding process should be very repeatable. So for most people, there shouldn't be massive changes in there. So we want to try and continuously, once somebody knows what they have to do, just get them an expert in it and then just repeat. The feedback part probably comes in 2 places. So we always have Culture Amp that we use as well to get feedback on everyone. But as well as that, we get so much insight from the check-ins with a coffee with HR. And what's really interesting is that used to be a formal meeting in a meeting room and we'd get some value from it. As soon as we changed it to an informal one, just over coffee, we got 10 times as much information that came out of it, where people just kind of relaxed a bit more.
And the 200 people you hired in 2019, what kind of dropout have you seen? Do you know those numbers?
Off the top of my head, I don't actually know. I think the last time we looked, I think our attrition rate was less than 5%. So it's not very big at the moment. It's pretty low in terms of who churns out of the organisation. I don't think you're ever going to get it perfect. I think you have to realistic. There's going to be some churn, but it's certainly not a place where we're replacing 100
No.
people and hiring 200.
A tiny bit of churn is actually healthy anyway in an organisation. It doesn't do any harm because you bring in new ideas and fresh ways of thinking, etc. Last question. I know we've overrun ever slightly, and this wasn't from one single person, but a few people asked this right at the end in the Q&A. And I thought I'd ask it because I've been in the thick of OKRs myself recently, working with an organisation. So what are OKRs, Ben?
Oh God, how long have we got? So I think they were originally put together by IBM. And I think that Google popularised them. It's the idea of objective and key results. And the idea is that every quarter you put together some very clear goals of what each department is trying to do. And then it's broken down onto a level of who's responsible for each different part of it. The big thing that we find with it is just alignment across the organisation of like, you have your big company OKRs of what the entire organisation is hoping to achieve. That's then broken down by department, and then it's almost broken down onto a smaller level as well. So everyone is fully aware of how what they are doing can actually contribute to the overall direction of the entire organisation and make sure that we're still pushing towards our annual goals and aspirations.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Very insightful. You summarised that perfectly. Listen, Ben, thank you, my friend. That was excellent. No problem. So I'm going to say goodbye to you now, so we can bring Katrina on stage. I'm sure there'll be loads more questions. If you could pop into the chat as well and see if there's anything you can pick up in there, that would be fantastic. So, finally, as I said earlier, last but most definitely not least, we have my friend Katrina Hutchinson O'Neill from Join Talent, who'll be talking through the return on investment of onboarding. Before Katrina does her thing, let's do my final piece of our audience participation in the chat. So what for you guys is the most important aspect of a good onboarding experience for you personally? Hello, Katrina. While we're waiting for those responses, virtual hugs, how are you?
I'm really good, apart from, and this never happens when you're on stage, Alan, literally about 3 minutes ago, my children came in and asked me to open a bottle of Sprite, which they clearly dropped in the kitchen. So I now have ceilings right on the walls, all over myself. These things don't happen on stages, right?
No. And I'm glad you said Sprite there, whether your children are asking you to open a bottle of Sprite.
The kids aren't allowed to drink Prosecco before 5 o'clock, it's fine.
So how's life? How are you coping during these weird times?
Yeah, to be honest, I think it takes a global pandemic for you to realise how cut off your life is, because you don't need to change that much. Living on the side of a mountain in Scotland, the only thing that's changed for me is not flying down to London 3 days a week, and probably, to be honest, being more productive. So it's a bit of a time.
Likewise. So listen, over to you. I know you've got a lot to tell people, and a lot that I want to hear as well. And I'm looking forward to coming back on in about 20 minutes or so and doing the Q&A thing. Good luck.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So let me do the indignity of getting my screen shared and getting that up there. Okay, perfect. So just a little bit of an introduction to everybody. Great that there are so many of you could make it today. As Alan said, my name is Katrina Hutchinson O'Neill. I'm the founder of a talent acquisition management consultancy business called Join Talent, and general purveyor of opinions about all things talent acquisition, which is absolutely my passion area in life. I've had a little bit of an unusual career journey. I started out in operations management in the BPO sector, running customer service ops for companies like Microsoft, Amazon, and Cisco. Decided to train as an in-house management consultant, and then fell into recruitment through the RPO angle, and then went on to run strategic and delivery areas for recruitment for companies like RBS, HCL, and Nationwide. So I probably come with a slightly different viewpoint into resourcing, having come from that consultancy and transformation background. And I think that works well on the subject we're going to talk about today. So at Join Talent, something that we practice is what we call dirty consultancy. And we're going to touch on that today in terms of what I'll talk to you about ROI. But ultimately, it's the concept that things don't fit neatly into a quadrant or a model, and that actually the real world is a lot more complicated than that. And ROI for a SaaS investment or for a process investment in the world of HR technology is absolutely no different to that. So just to get started, do I have a model for what great onboarding looks like? Well, given that I've just said that we don't operate from cut and paste models, you'll not be surprised that I'm going to say I don't. And the reason for that is that, as I think Ben probably articulated really well, a great onboarding journey is one that delivers what your company, your new hires, and your managers specifically need. And that's going to be as personal to your company as your culture is. What I do have though, and I've illustrated it here on the slide, is a simple illustration that describes what we're trying to achieve through a great onboarding journey. And in its purest form, in my view, what we're really striving for in good onboarding is smoothing that curve from the heightened expectations and excitement of a new hire to the point that they are engaged, they're confident in their role, they feel like they're part of your organization, and therefore working in a really productive way. The better designed your approach to onboarding, the better you're going to retain people and the more return on investment you're going to get. So today I'm not going to talk to you about what an onboarding process is or how to build that. I think Ben and Stacey have really done a fantastic job at that. I'm going to specifically use a couple of case studies to talk to you about how you define an ROI for this journey, for that getting somebody from that peak of expectations onto the plateau of productivity. And I'm going to specifically, when I talk through the case studies, talk about an approach that lets you structure your thinking to that return on investment. So first of all, before I start, quick poll for everybody. I'm really interested, and especially given that many of you have said that you're pretty much nailing onboarding today, which is great. How do you measure ROI for HR transformation in your company today? Either you don't do it formally, it's up to individual projects, or you've got a really structured model to do that. I'll just give you a few seconds to fill that in. Okay, we have a look at the scores on the doors. Wow, okay. That's super interesting. So I'm probably surprised by that, given that there's such confidence earlier in terms of how well onboarding is being managed, that there aren't formal processes in place to manage that. I think that will be a really interesting one. I'd love to explore a little bit more in the Q&A afterwards. So I guess when it comes to measuring onboarding ROI, there's a concept which any of you who come from a transformation background will recognize about dividing benefits that you're going to get from any activity into 4 areas: operational, financial, technical, and strategic. Little bit of information around those. Operational, top left, is the group of benefits you'd get from process level efficiency. So ROI on headcount savings, manager effort improvements, candidate retention in your process, those types of areas. Financial is the group of benefits you get from things like reduction in your hiring costs, in your attraction, your ramp to productivity, reduction for impact of revenue generating roles where you're getting a lot of attrition, all of those areas. Technical is quite interesting because this is a little bit harder to map and manage in a fiscal way. But typically technical savings are from reduction in things like risks in your process, particularly important if you're working in a regulated industry. Improvement in compliance, again important for technical roles or regulated companies, and also in stability of data flows and the ability to make better decisions. And then finally, strategic benefits are those that we probably aspire to the most. And strangely, probably the ones that people will talk about the most when they don't have clear mechanisms in place to measure those in the other boxes. But this is around things like your employer brand, your ability to gain and retain skills into your organization, your ability to compete for talent. In the majority of HR transformation cases, I tend to find it's the operational and financial levers that are first cited as the call to action. Typically, not a big shock, because somebody's realizing they're either losing a lot of people to attrition and they need to fix that, they're spending too much money on their recruitment processes. There's a clear and obvious driver that usually sits in someone's budget line somewhere, and that's why they've decided to implement this type of work. I was really pleased, however, to hear Ben talking about how in their organisation they really focused on the fact that they knew it would be a strategic advantage. So before they'd even got to the point of it being a problem, they wanted to fix it at a strategic level. What I'm going to do now is walk through 2 case studies that show exactly how I've used these 4 different areas of ROI to demonstrate the benefits to the organisation of the work that we've done. So the first one, a little bit of background. This is a client who has just over 500 employees across 4 countries. They had no in-country HR in 2 of those 4 countries, pretty common challenge. And they needed to hire about 60, just over 60 back-end developers each year across those 4 countries in 3 languages, but with English as the common language for the company. The hiring managers in this company had a strong preference for local language delivery for onboarding, even though English was that common language. And the company had decided themselves that they wanted to look at onboarding because they had a specific problem that very definitely fit into those top 2 boxes, which was that they had issues with rookie attrition, so people leaving within the first 12 months on the role. In fact, in this company, it was nearly 40% annualized attrition, specifically in those back-end developer roles. And the company also realized that replacements for those roles, as we all know as recruiters, are incredibly difficult to find. So that was costing them a lot of money. When we went in to do this work, they had some onboarding processes in place, but again, going back a little bit to what Stacey and Ben have both said, they were relatively manual at the beginning, quite clunky, quite inefficient, very much down to individual hiring managers, or in the 2 countries where they had a little bit of HR support, luck of the draw in those countries with the HR BP that you had to support you, but nothing that was consistent or reliable. As I said, I'm not going to talk about the solution itself and how you build that solution, because that's not really what I'm here to do today. But I feel it would probably be a little bit disconcerting to not see how that at least fit together. So we've put a little bit of that information in here for you. I think the important thing with this solution is that we segmented the onboarding journeys by role and by language. We allowed each user to access exactly the information they needed to be successful on the platform and in their onboarding journey. And each of those features is outlined on the slide, so I'm not going to talk through that. However, when we did the delivery on this to maximize engagement up front and to maximize our ability to generate ROI, we used agile methodology. So we sought an MVP, minimum viable product, for each one of the features that we wanted to build, and we pushed that out, starting with that middle box of day 1, days from the point the offer went out to day 1, because that's the point that we knew that we were losing people. Then moving on to the grow section, which was from day 1 until that person was feeling confident and competent. And the very last piece that we did was the very front end of the recruitment process, because that was more of a nice to have for that organization. So what ROI did we get? So in this organization, in this particular case study, we ended up specifically generating the biggest impact in terms of the financial ROI. Now, again, that's probably not a big surprise, given that we started this journey with a requirement to save a significant amount of money due to the attrition issues that they had. We identified upfront, therefore, as a result of the reason for doing this work, that financial was going to be the biggest requirement. And therefore, as we designed the process, we built into that process all of the levers that we would need to be able to capture the data to tell us if we were having the desired effect, which also then gave us the data to be able to demonstrate the ROI. And that's something I'd call out really strongly to any of you commencing this work, or even retrofitting onto work that you've done already. Look for the data proof points within your onboarding journey that are going to let you measure the ROI that you're getting for BAU, continuous improvement, or indeed transformation, and make sure that they're well engineered into the actual process. Very often, they're not going to be in one system. Certainly in this case, those data points were not in one system. Whilst we were using a single system to deliver the content to the actual new recruits who are coming into the process, we were still pushing and pulling information from the ATS, from the HRIS, and also from the LMS. And each of those systems contained their own points of data that we needed to feed into the overall data picture. I don't think that's unusual, and I think that's something that most of you are going to have to consider when you look at pulling this together. In terms of the benefits that we generated for this organisation, in year one, given the big focus was reduction in rookie attrition, and they were sitting at 40%, in year one, we delivered a 6.6% reduction. Now that might sound like it's not very much. Why was it not much bigger than that? And you'd be right to ask that. The target that the company wanted to hit was a 25% minimum reduction in their attrition. And this is kind of where dirty consulting in many ways comes into it. Unfortunately, onboarding by itself is very rarely, like most things, a magic bullet that's going to fix all of your problems. If you've got issues with attrition and retention in your organization, fixing your onboarding is going to be an important part of that journey, but you will also need to go and fix a number of other things. And this organization were smart enough to realize that. So the piece of work that we were doing, the really important piece of work we were doing on onboarding, had a key part to play in delivering that overarching ROI and that overarching impact to the business metrics, but it was one part of it. And we tried really hard to make sure that we were being quite honest and open in our data capture and trying, and it is a grey area at times, but trying to capture only the benefits that we could directly pin back to the work that we'd done on onboarding around that reduction in the attrition. Our ROI on year one in financials could also have been a lot faster. But again, a really important point, the company itself, because there was so much other change happening and they had so many other issues to fix, had pretty low capacity to absorb multiple points of change. So they wanted quite a controlled rollout using that MVP strategy, that minimum viable product strategy. And that's something that's also really important to consider whenever you're looking at your benefits. It's really easy to overstate the benefits that you're trying to get from a project, but consider what's realistic, what's provable in terms of your ROI, but also that environment that you're working within the organization and what's going to be acceptable in terms of the adoption of what you're trying to create in that organization. I want to also call out the strategic benefits that we delivered in this organization. So one of the big benefits that we were able to track back to this piece of work was the increase in active applications, which increased by 3% in a way that we could directly attribute back to the work we'd done. Now that sounds a bit strange. We weren't working on attraction. Why was that? Really simply because we worked with this organization to push out some really exciting comms, and we got new hires involved in that. We built some little moments of magic, moments of love into that onboarding journey. And through that, we generated content that we pushed out on a range of different social channels. And from that content, we actually got some really great new candidates into the process. So think about those ancillary benefits as well. So that was one case study. I want to do a quick poll, just as we've now talked a little bit about the non-fiscal ROIs. Within your company, how comfortable do you find that people are in accounting for non-fiscal ROIs? So is it taken seriously? Is it taken seriously to a degree, or are people pretty uncomfortable with that? Give you just a few seconds to answer that. Okay, can we get the results? Okay, perfect. And do you know, that is not a surprise. So vast majority of people saying to a degree, but it's not enough to get a business case over the line, which is why I'm so impressed, Ben, that you managed to do that in your organization, and kudos to you for that as well. People talk a lot about the non-fiscal benefits. They will talk a lot about the impact on your employer brand, the impact, as I mentioned earlier, on things like skills, retention. But really, whenever the rubber hits the road and you're going in and you're asking for a check of some description to support your investment in that it's not usually going to be enough. So the second case study, we've got a business here of just over 1,000 heads, nearly double the size of the other organisation. They needed just over 100 sales hires per annum across 23 countries, all English language, and in total they had about 100 people in that sales department. Hiring managers in that organisation could only access remote support from a really small HR team. When we first joined working with that organisation, they only had 3 people in their HR team for an organisation with that level of geographic spread, which was pretty tight. The company also, like the first case study, had identified their own driver. Now, that always won't be the case. Sometimes you've got to create the driver within an organization and come up with the story. In this case, the organization had also identified that attrition was a major issue for them. Was even higher than the previous company. They were running at just over 60% attrition in the first 6 months in those sales roles. In fact, there was a general view in the company that you probably weren't even going to make it in the company, or consider that you were going to make it in the company, until you'd got past 6 months in those roles. And in the case of one line manager, she said that she just called people bud or buddy until they got a few months in, because her level of churn was so big at the front end. We did perhaps point out that calling them bud or buddy could have something to do with that, but that's a separate topic of conversation. They had nothing in place in terms of onboarding. It was really manual. Experiences were wildly different by geography. Some great examples of best practice, which we went on to adopt into the journey that we designed for them, which we called their love journey. They wanted to make people fall in love with them. So that was our core goal. So some things were great. In other countries, it was sink or swim. And not because you had bad managers, but because you had managers who were probably really busy, largely because they were so understaffed, and it was a vicious cycle that has started to be generated. Employer brand was really, really important to this organization. It was something that their C-suite talked about to a huge extent. It was actually a topic of conversation on every one of their quarterly agendas. So that was something that they also wanted us to work hard to demonstrate how we delivered a positive ROI in. And that was quite unusual, but a really positive adoption into the process. So this is the simplified journey that we built for them. Again, each of the features that we built in their solutions were designed from an initial wireframe of an end-to-end flow. In this case, one thing that was different was that we didn't use the MVP approach. And the reason that we didn't do that was that the organization wanted to push all of this out in a oneer, do a big bang, and launch this on day one as a complete solution. The reality is you'll always have a bit of rework to do on that. Some things don't necessarily work as well in a real environment as they did in your A/B testing environment whenever you were designing it. But about 95% of what we launched on day one hit the mark, and we did a little bit of tinkering around the edges. Technology was a bespoke onboarding platform, but we added in quite a lot of LMS functionality to that as well. So the benefits for this organization, we rolled out the solution, built it and rolled it out over the course of 12 weeks. Everything was up and running and fully in place, including that little bit of extra tinkering that we did around the edges by the end of week 18. Their ROI value extended much past the platform and the process-related savings, which allowed them to not only scale more reliably as an organization because they had huge plans for growth, But it also, as the ROI numbers were based on flat hiring projection, gave them a platform to deliver increasing ROI as those hiring numbers ramped up with their growth plan as an organization. So how did we articulate an ROI? So in this case, operational cost savings were the lead. We had a full FTE reduction in HR admin and 6 days of hiring manager effort saved per new hire. Now, there was a lot of adding up fingers and toes to get to that average time, but we were pretty confident of the calculations that sat behind that. Just to kind of underline that, 6 days per new hire of hiring manager time that we saved by designing an onboarding process that also delivered a better experience for those new hires. Those 6 days of hiring manager time per new hire, based on the average number of new hires each one of those sales managers had per year, is about 30 days per hiring manager per year, which is about 12% of their total working days per annum. When you start to roll those numbers up, that becomes really impressive. And that particular ROI facet, which wasn't one the organization had thought about up front, when we started to talk to the C-suite about that and show them the evidence that supported the improvement that they were therefore going to get in terms of availability and productivity within that management population, actually encouraged them to think more broadly about a wider program that looked at hiring manager capability and other areas of HR transformation. So that became almost a bigger talking point in the ROI in this particular piece of work than the original request of retention did. On retention, however, we also delivered a 25%, just under 24.7% reduction of pre-start dropout and a 26% reduction in rookie attrition, which equated for them to 14 annualized hires, which saved them about just under $250,000 in hiring and training costs. So a huge return on investment. It wasn't difficult for them to meet a year one ROI in this, although the company would have been happy to have a 2 to 3 year ROI. Onboarding paperwork completion was a huge, huge impact for this organization. If you imagine with that geographic spread, they didn't have a suitable digital solution. So they had issues with compliance. They were letting people take photographs on cameras because they didn't have a DocuSign type tool, and people had issues with attachments. So by implementing an end-to-end element within the onboarding journey that allowed them to drive better compliance, we also managed to save them 8.5 days of average time from somebody accepting the offer to their start date, because that was one of the biggest blockers in getting people in and getting their bum on a seat. Another important one with them, because these were sales roles, was the actual benefit that was delivered in terms of those sales, the sales empty seats themselves. In this case, in the organization, each one of those salespeople typically had a target of about £200,000 of revenue per annum. That meant that every single day that there was an empty seat, because they were having to constantly re-recruit people because of attrition or get people up that ramp of productivity, they were losing around about £600-700 in any given day, which was huge. So this also generated a massive bottom line impact for them in terms of that stability and that productivity. So key takeaways before Alan shouts at me that I'm over time, because I think I'm pretty much there. My 4 key takeaways on ROI. It is a difficult area and it does require a bit of pre-thinking on your part. Number 1 is use that OFTS framework thinking to make sure that you've really interrogated all of the different areas that you think you're going to be able to get ROI from. Don't ignore fiscal or non-fiscal ROI. Even if your organization isn't particularly receptive to it, it's a really, really important part of your story to pull out, and it can lead you to some surprising places, as I've already given an example of. Third one is don't disappear into overly complex conversations and calculations on compound benefits. Compound benefits could be a whole topic in and of itself, but fundamentally it's, if I used to lose 10 people and now I only lose 5, will that 5 that I now don't have to recruit for deliver a ever cascading benefit? honestly, it becomes way too complicated and people fall out of love with the calculations. Keep it simple. And then last but not least, big one, track and report on your benefits. Think about that from day one whenever you're designing or redesigning your process. Look at the data points you're going to need to collect and make sure that you're constantly tracking and reporting on those. I hope that was useful. And Alan, I don't know if you're still there.
I've just come to shout at you for overrunning.
by 1 minute 30 seconds. I do apologise.
Thanks
You're
for
a very
that. And I've
scary
also
man, Alan, a very scary man.
Oh yeah, that's me, terrifying. I've got this urge to call you Buddy as well now.
buddy. That was one of those toe curling moments where someone says, "Yeah, I don't wear your name for the first 3 months." I'm like, is it one of your biggest problem?
Yeah, it could well be that lack of self-awareness, maybe. Yeah, without a doubt. Listen, that was fantastic. I think so much detail and so much for people to take away there. Really insightful. We have got quite a lot of questions. I don't think we'll get through all of them, so I'll get through the ones that I prioritised mentally in my head. First things first, though, why do you think HR traditionally haven't been great at building business cases?
Oh, that's such a loaded question with so many HR folks on the call. Honestly, I think it's, if you go back to even in the UK, the kind of general route that people come into HR through CIPD, it's not a big area of focus.
No.
Right, and I think you've heard me talk about it a few times. It's the biggest area that I get asked to talk about at conferences or in companies. How do HR people build business cases? I think it's just a skill that isn't supported or applauded enough, and I think that's massively to the detriment of HR functions. I've had that experience of going into a company, into a director of TA role, securing £9 million of funding from the transformation pot to run transformation programs, and getting a little bit of pushback from other people in HR who thought that was terribly unfair because they didn't go in and build that business case themselves. Yeah,
it's a difficult one, isn't it? But there's probably loads of functions across the business that aren't necessarily that wonderful at building ROI, but because of the part of the business they sit in, they don't actually have to be as good. Because they're revenue generating and that type of thing. It's an interesting point.
And if you're running a lot of your change out of your own budgets, then you can be a little bit more loosey-goosey, but it's a really good practice to get some rigor around this, because at the point you do need to go cap in hand to a transformation budget or for a budget uplift, having that history of being able to demonstrate great ROI really helps.
So, in your opinion, you talked really in real detail there about ROI and how to calculate it, etc. But when is an onboarding program successful? Does it have to break even fiscally, or can it fall short and deliver other benefits?
I think it can definitely fall short and deliver other benefits. It really depends on the organisation and what your starting point was and what your desired endpoint was. I think Ben's given a great example of that already today. They didn't start out with fiscal ROIs in mind. They started out with this was about their culture, it was about their brand. And the demonstrable piece for them, I imagine, in terms of the ROI was that they were getting that feedback from candidates and from new hires saying that they felt really engaged in the process. I think that's great. It's just unfortunate that most organizations, they are going to look for that fiscal ROI.
You talked about let me get the letters right. I can remember them, just might not have the right order. OSFT model, which I loved. Yeah. And different things that you can measure within each of those different areas. For somebody coming at this new who's perhaps not practiced that before in terms of the OSFT and they want to give it a go themselves, is there somewhere they can go and get almost a library of things they might want to look at measuring or anything like that? Or
yeah, so Dr. Google, Google is a great place to start on that front. If you're stuck on your thinking about where you might be able to get benefits, put up those 4 categories. Have a brainstorm with your team around the different areas that fall in underneath them and how you think you're performing, where you could gain benefits. If all else fails, go and look online for some inspiration, or come and ping somebody like me on LinkedIn and ask for an update. There's plenty of people out there in the TA world who are always happy to help on that front, and some really great stories from organizations on this front as well.
Excellent. There's loads more questions, but I'm now getting chased to tell me to wrap things up. Anybody who's not had a question answered, we will come back to you and try and answer that by the email or by the FAQ that will go out. So you'll get an answer in some way, shape or form. Or reach out to Katrina on social. She's very friendly and very warm, and she'll no doubt help. Katrina, thanks so much for your time. That's been fantastic. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Excellent. So, everybody, that's it. We're coming to a close. Thanks again to all of our speakers. We've just seen Katrina, of course. Thanks to Ben from Personio, and thanks to Stacey as well. As we've said right at the very beginning, all of the recordings and presentations will be sent out, and I'm told that they'll be sent out tomorrow. So you'll get those really rapidly. You might get an email from me as well saying hello and thanking you for coming along. Audience, you've been amazing. You've been so engaging with the polls, with my silly fella questions. Thanks for coming to this. Hopefully you'll come along to some of the Apical roundtables as well. I heartily advise you to do that because they drill down into some serious detail around onboarding and reboarding. Really recommend that there'd be something you'll enjoy. You'll get a survey email after the event asking you what you thought. What you thought of the presenters, maybe what you thought of the host, be kind. And yeah, give us the feedback. We want to make sure this event improves every year. So far it has, but it's getting harder year on year, and we can only do that with the feedback that you provide to us. And of course, a big thank you to our partners, Personio and Yes We Connect Again. And without their support, we really couldn't have made this happen. And can I personally thank the Apical team? Everyone's been amazing. The support from all has been wonderful. In particular, kind of getting me through today and last week, Eric, Jan, but mainly, and I've got to say this because Christoph, you're fantastic. The way you organise these events is incredible. Thanks so much for everything you've done to make this happen. And that's it. So I'm done. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. Hopefully, I'll see you again at the next event, which will probably be Amsterdam, whether it's virtual or in person, who knows, but either way, I'll hopefully be there again. Cheers, guys. Take care.